Leo Maxwell adjusted the headset, the faux leather earpads pressing firmly against his ears. The hum of the massive soundboard was a familiar lullaby, but tonight it vibrated with an unfamiliar tension. 22, Leo had landed his dream job, the kind of gig that made every aspiring sound engineer green with envy. Mixing for Elvis Presley, not just any Elvis show either, but a long residency at the International Hotel in Las Vegas. This wasn't some dingy club. This was the big leagues, a cathedral of sound and spectacle, where the king himself held court. From his perch in the sound booth, a glass-encased sanctuary high above the stage, Leo could see the opulent showroom slowly filling. Velvet seats, shimmering chandeliers, the low murmur of anticipation from the well-dressed crowd. It was an almost overwhelming sight. He'd meticulously checked every microphone, every cable, every speaker in the grand room. Hours had been spent on sound checks, adjusting EQs, tweaking reverb, ensuring the perfect balance for the backing vocals, the horns, the strings, the rhythm section. His hands, usually so steady, felt a slight tremor as he ran through his mental checklist one last time. Leo had always been obsessed with sound. As a kid, he'd taken apart his dad's old radio just to see how the speakers worked, how the wires carried the magic. He'd spent his teenage years in garages, mixing local bands, learning the quirks of cheap equipment and the acoustics of bad rooms. This wasn't just about technical skill. It was about honoring a legend. Elvis Presley wasn't just a singer. He was an icon, a force of nature. His voice was a national treasure, and Leo was its temporary guardian. Maxwell, mic check on the king's vocal. 5 minutes, came a gruff voice over his comms, breaking through his thoughts. It was Marty, the seasoned stage manager, a man whose patience was as thin as the strings on a banjo. "Copy that, Marty," Leo mumbled, his throat suddenly dry. He focused on the gleaming silver microphone positioned center stage. This wasn't the first show he'd mixed for Elvis, but the pressure never eased. Each performance felt like an audition, a test of his worth. A single wrong dial, a sudden burst of feedback, a mic cutting out. Any of these could ruin a moment, disrupt the flow, even slightly annoy the king. The thought alone sent a chill down his spine. He remembered the first time he'd met Elvis briefly during a sound check a few weeks ago. Elvis had walked onto the stage, a towering figure, even in his casual clothes, radiating an aura that filled the room. He'd flashed Leo a quick, easy smile. "You, the man making me sound good, son?" he'd asked, his voice smooth as velvet. Leo had stammered something about doing his best, feeling like a nervous kid again. Elvis had just chuckled. "That's all anyone can ask, ain't it?" That simple exchange had both thrilled and terrified. Elvis wasn't a demanding diva, but his very presence implied a standard of excellence that Leo desperately wanted to meet. He wanted to be the best for Elvis, to create a sonic tapestry that perfectly focated that incredible voice, that raw energy. He wanted to blend Gackett into the background, a silent architect of sound, making sure every note, every nuance, reached the audience with crystal clarity. Now, as the lights dimmed further and the buzz in the showroom grew louder, Leo took a deep breath. His fingers hovered over the faders, his eyes scanning the array of glowing buttons and blinking lights. This was it. The king was about to enter the building, and Leo Maxwell was responsible for making him sound like the king he was. The weight of the world, it seemed, rested squarely on his young shoulders, suspended somewhere between the last speaker check and the first chord of the opening number. He swallowed hard, adjusted his headset one more time, and braced himself. The show was about to begin. The air backstage was a unique blend of nervous energy and practiced routine. Leo, having descended from his sound booth to double-check a stage monitor, found himself caught in the whirlwind. Roadies moved with purpose, adjusting last-minute props, tuning guitars. The smell of hairspray mixed with the faint scent of stale cigarette smoke in anticipation. Then a hush fell, almost imperceptibly at first, rippling through the crew like an electric current. Everyone straightened, a little eyes turning towards the dressing room corridor. The king was coming. Elvis Presley emerged, not with a grand entrance but with a quiet dignity that was even more powerful. He was dressed, of course, in one of his iconic jumpsuits. Tonight, a pristine white one, adorned with intricate gold embroidery and shimmering rhinestones. It caught the light even in the dim backstage area, making him seem to glow. His hair was perfectly coiffed, his sideburns impeccably styled. He looked every bit the superstar. But what struck Leo most was his calm demeanor. Elvis wasn't pacing or looking stressed. He walked slowly, greeting band members with a nod or a word, sharing a quiet joke with a backing singer. He had a natural grace, a way of moving that suggested he was entirely comfortable in his own skin. Even minutes before stepping in front of thousands of screaming fans, Leo, trying to look busy near a speaker stack, watched him with a mixture of awe and professional curiosity. He noted the way Elvis held himself, the quiet confidence that radiated from him. It made Leo feel even more acutely the importance of his own role. He had to match that level of cool to translate that effortless charisma into flawless sound. Marty, the stage manager, met Elvis with a clipboard. Everything's set, full house tonight. They're already tearing the roof off, just waiting. Elvis gave a slow smile, a corner of his lip curling. Good to hear, Marty. Let's give him something to remember, shall we? His voice was low, resonant, even in conversation. It had that unique drawl that was instantly recognizable, filled with a warmth that surprised Leo. As Elvis walked past, heading towards the stage entrance, his eyes briefly met Leo's. Leo immediately looked down at his monitor, pretending to fuss with a knob, but then he felt a gentle tap on his shoulder. Sound check went well, son, Elvis said, his voice softer than Leo expected. You got everything dialed in just right. Leo straightened, trying to sound professional, not starstruck. Yes, Mr. Presley, everything's perfect, crystal clear. Elvis nodded, his expression serious for a moment. Then he winked. Good. Don't want any surprises out there, do we? Just the good kind. He gave another easy smile and moved on, disappearing into the shadows of the stage entrance. Leo let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Don't want any surprises, just the good kind. The words echoed in his head as he made his way back up to the sound booth, a slight tremor in his hands. It was a good-natured comment, but it reinforced the immense responsibility he felt. He was part of a finely tuned machine, and any deviation, any misstep could throw the whole thing off. From his sound booth, high above the expectant crowd, Leo watched the house lights slowly dim. The murmuring ceased, replaced by a collective intake of breath. He could feel the anticipation in the air, thick and palpable like an electrical charge. He saw the spotlights coalesce on the stage entrance, waiting. This was it. No turning back, no more tweaks, just pure, unadulterated performance. He settled into his chair, head set firmly in place. His fingers hovered over the mixing board, ready for action. Thousands of people, all here for one man, for one voice, and that voice, that sound, was in his hands. He took another deep breath, trying to push down the lingering anxiety. He had to be perfect for Elvis, for the fans, for himself. The drums rolled a low rumble that vibrated through the floor, the trumpets blared, and then the roar of the crowd as Elvis Presley stepped into the spotlight. The show had begun. The roar of the crowd was a physical force washing over Leo in his sound booth. It was an oceanic sound, a primal scream of adoration that made the very glass enclosure vibrate. Even through his noise-canceling headset, he could feel it in his chest. And then emerging from the wings, bathed in a single searing spotlight, was Elvis. He didn't just walk onto the stage, he commanded it. He moved with a confident swagger, acknowledging the screams with a tilt of his head, a half smile. His white jumpsuit shimmered under the stage lights, catching every facet of the rhinestones, turning him into a living, breathing constellation. He grabbed the microphone, and the band, the legendary TCB band, exploded into the opening chords of That's All Right. Leo's hands flew across the mixing board, adjusting levels, bringing up Elvis's vocal, ensuring every nuance of that iconic voice cut through the powerful instrumentation. The drums pounded, the bass guitar throbbed, the horns blared with precision. Elvis's voice, rich and powerful, filled the showroom, reverberating off the walls, reaching every single person in the audience. He started slow, almost conversational, before unleashing the full power of his boozy rock and roll. The crowd went wild. Women screamed, men cheered, flashbulbs popped like a flurry of tiny stars. Leo watched him mesmerized, even as his fingers worked with practiced ease. Elvis was a master, moving from one side of the stage to the other, making eye contact with individual fans, pulling them into his orbit. He sang with his whole body, his hips swaying, his hands gesturing, embodying every word. The first few songs flew by in a blur of electrifying energy. Proud Mary had the audience clapping along, its driving rhythm filling the room. Then, Suspicious Minds, a fan favorite, got everyone on their feet dancing in the aisles. Leo kept the sound crisp, clean, making sure every instrument had its place in the mix, never overpowering Elvis's vocal, but always supporting its incredible range. He was in the zone, a state of focused concentration where the outside world faded away. It was just him, the mixing board, and the music. He could feel the pulse of the show, anticipate Elvis's movements, know exactly when to bring up a harmony vocal or drop the drums for a dramatic pause. This was what he looked for. This was why he'd endured years of cramped practice spaces and faulty equipment. This was the pinnacle. Elvis paused, taking a moment to address the audience. His voice, now calmer, filled with warmth, spoke of his appreciation, his love for his fans. He bantered, he joked, he teased. The crowd ate it up, hanging on his every word. Leo brought up the vocal slightly, making sure every syllable was clear. Then, with a charming grin, Elvis announced the next song. All right, he drawled, the crowd erupting in applause again. This one's a little bit different. Something I want to sing for all of y'all who've been with me from the start. A little bit of soul, a little bit of feeling. The band began the gentle, soulful intro to American Trio. It was a powerful, emotional medley blending a folk song, a spiritual, and a patriotic hymn. It was a moment of profound beauty in his shows, often bringing tears to the eyes of the audience. The spotlight softened, bathing Elvis in a warm glow as he stood center stage, his voice already imbued with deep emotion. Leo leaned into the board, his touch becoming even more delicate. This song required absolute precision, a perfect balance of the sweeping strings, the gentle percussion, and Elvis's heartfelt delivery. He closed his eyes for a second, just to feel the sound, to ensure it was as pure as possible. This was where the technical skill met artistry, where the sound engineer became an extension of the performer. He felt good, confident. The show was going perfectly. Little did he know perfection was about to take a very unexpected detour. The opening notes of American Trio hung in the air, a delicate tapestry woven by the orchestra. Elvis's voice, rich and resonant, flowed over the melody, filling the showroom with a poignant beauty. Leo was completely absorbed, his fingers dancing lightly over the faders, subtly adjusting the string section, here nudging up a choir, mic there. The sound was pristine, the emotion palpable. This was the magic. Elvis moved to the first verse, his eyes closed, his hand gripping the microphone. Stand. Oh, I wish I was in Dixie. His voice soared, carrying the weight of history and longing. The audience was silent, captivated, a collective hush falling over the vast room. You could hear a pin drop, broken only by the sublime sound of Elvis's voice and the accompanying music. Leo glanced at his monitoring screen, ensuring all levels were in the green. Everything was perfect, too perfect. Tiny, almost imperceptible flicker caught his eye on a diagnostic panel. Power surge. He made a mental note to check it after the show. It was a minor anomaly, probably just a harmless flicker. He pulled his attention back to Elvis, who was now deep into the second part of the song. All my trials, Lord, soon be over. His voice was a raw, soulful cry, full of hope and despair. Just as Elvis reached the emotional crescendo of the line, right before the majestic surge of the orchestra, Leo felt a sudden, inexplicable jolt. His elbow, perhaps from leaning too much or perhaps just a cruel twist of fate, brushed against a small, unlabeled button on a rarely used auxiliary panel that controlled the FX unit. He hadn't even known it was there, so tucked away and out of sight, his eyes widened in horror. He saw a tiny red indicator light flash on that auxiliary panel, and then through the silence of the showroom, cutting through the powerful, heartfelt notes of Elvis Presley, came a sound so utterly ridiculous, so completely out of place, that it felt like a cosmic joke. A loud, sustained, utterly unambiguous duck quack blasted through the massive speakers, echoing off the walls of the showroom like a rogue waterfowl had somehow nested in the rafters. It wasn't just a brief honk. It was a long, drawn-out, insistent quack that hung in the air. For what felt like an eternity, reverberating with an almost comical persistence, Elvis, mid-sentence, mid-note frozen, the orchestra faltered. A few brass players noticeably flinching, their harmonious blend suddenly shattered by the bizarre intrusion. The soaring strings crashed back to earth. Leo's heart seized in his chest. His hands, which had been so precise moments before, were now frozen, hovering inches from the mixing board, unable to move. The sound of that ridiculous duck quack seemed to mock him, bouncing around the enormous room, magnifying his colossal mistake. He had just single-handedly ruined one of Elvis Presley's most powerful, most emotional songs. He had broken the spell, shattered the magic, and replaced it with the sound of a barnyard animal. His entire body felt numb, then hot with shame. He could feel his face burning even in the dim light of the booth. He squeezed his eyes shut for a moment, wishing the floor would open up and swallow him whole. This wasn't just a mistake. It was an act of sabotage, an unforgivable sacrilege in the temple of the king. He had failed. Oh God, he had failed spectacularly. The quack hung in the air, a bizarre, cartoonish punctuation mark on a moment of profound artistry. It had come out of nowhere, shattering the hushed reverence of the showroom. For a long, agonizing second, there was an absolute stunned silence. Not the respectful silence of a captivated audience, but the dead silence of shock. On stage, Elvis stood, frozen microphone, still clutched in his hand, his mouth slightly open. His eyes, which had been closed in concentration, were now wide open, darting around the room as if searching for the source of the unexpected waterfowl. The TCB band, usually so tight and professional, had visibly faltered. The drummer had stopped mid-roll, his sticks held aloft. The bassist's fingers were suspended over the strings. The horn section looked bewildered, some of them glancing at each other, others scanning the ceiling. Then a ripple went through the audience, a few titters quickly stifled. Confused murmur began to spread like a low tide returning to the shore. People leaned into each other, whispering, "Did you hear that?" What was that? Up in the sound booth, Leo was paralyzed. His hands were still hovering over the mixing board, but they felt like blocks of ice. His stomach plummeted, a sickening sensation. He could feel sweat breaking out on his forehead. Every sound in the showroom felt amplified. The confused murmurs, the distant hum of the air conditioning, even the frantic pounding of his own heart against his ribs. He wanted to reach out, to slam the errant button, to make the horrible sound go away, but his muscles wouldn't obey. His brain was screaming, "Fix it, do something." But his body was locked in a state of terror. He could feel the eyes of the crew on him even through the glass. Marty's voice crackled over his comms, not gruff now, but laced with disbelief and a chilling undertone of panic. "Maxwell, what the hell was that? Get it off, N.O.W." Leo could only manage a choked sound, a desperate gasp. He finally managed to lower his hand, fumbling blindly for the rogue button, his fingers shaking so badly he almost missed it. He slammed it down, hoping to cut the connection, to silence the monster he had unleashed. The red indicator light, the harbinger of his doom, winked out. The quack finally mercifully faded into silence. The sudden absence of the sound was almost as jarring as its arrival. The showroom was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet now. It was a loaded silence filled with unanswered questions, awkwardness, and a lingering echo of a ridiculous duck. Leo risked a glance at the stage. Elvis was still standing there, unmoving, his expression unreadable for a moment. Leo feared the worst. Would he storm off stage? Would he glare directly at the sound booth, his famous blue eyes narrowed in anger? Would his career be over right here, right now, before it had even truly begun? He imagined the headlines, Elvis's show quacked up by rookie tech. The shame was unbearable. He felt a hot flush crawl up his neck. His hands dropped to his lap. Useless. He wanted to disappear, to vanish into thin air. He had messed up beyond belief. He had taken a moment of profound beauty and turned it into a circus act. He had disgraced the king. He could almost hear the sound of his future career crashing down around him, punctuated by the phantom echo of a very loud, very persistent duck. He closed his eyes again, bracing himself for the inevitable fallout, the thunderous rebuke that surely awaited him. He could almost feel the cold dread of unemployment already. The silence in the showroom stretched thick and heavy, punctuated only by the lingering murmur of confused whispers. Leo, with his eyes squeezed shut, braced for the storm. He imagined Elvis's fury, the band's disappointment, the audience's irritation. He was ready for the end of his career, but then something shifted. A different sound, not the angry roar Leo expected, but something softer, building slowly, a single chuckle, then another and another. Leo cautiously opened his eyes on stage. Elvis was no longer frozen in shock. A slow, knowing smile was spreading across his face, a mischievous glint dancing in his blue eyes. He looked towards the sound booth, not with anger, but with an expression Leo couldn't quite decipher, a mix of surprise and something else, entirely amusement. Elvis raised his hand, not to scold, but to playfully silence the still murmuring crowd. He took a step forward, a relaxed, easy movement. He put the microphone to his lips, but instead of singing, he let out a perfectly articulated, if slightly exaggerated, quack. The sound, coming from the king himself, was so unexpected, so utterly ridiculous, that it sent a fresh wave of gasps and then roars of laughter through the audience. People howled, some slapping their knees, others pointing at the stage. The tension that had gripped the room instantly evaporated, replaced by pure, unadulterated hilarity. Elvis leaned into the mic, his smile widening. "Well now," he drawled, his voice filled with feigned surprise. "What in the world was that, y'all bringing your pets to the show tonight?" More laughter. Elvis then glanced towards Leo's booth again, his eyes twinkling, put a hand to his ear as if listening intently. Then he shook his head slowly. "Sounds like we got a new band member, folks. Maybe old Colonel Tom's branching out into animal acts." The band, recovering from their shock, started to catch on. The drummer, Ronnie Tut, tapped out a light comedic drum roll. The bassist, Jerry Sheff, plucked a few silly, bouncing notes. Elvis took another step, a playful glides and spins movement, and then, completely improvising, he looked up at the ceiling, then down at his feet, as if searching for the feathered culprit. He then pointed a finger at the floor, then at himself, as if to say, "Me? No, it wasn't me." And then back up at Leo's booth. It was a masterclass in physical comedy. Then, just as the laughter began to subside, Elvis brought the microphone close to his mouth again. He tilted his head, listening, pretending to have a conversation with the invisible duck. "You say you want to sing a duet?" he asked the air, his voice dripping with mock seriousness. "Well, bless your heart, fella, you got some pipes. I'll give you that. But American Trio might be a little out of your range." The showroom erupted. The laughter was so loud it was almost deafening. Leo, watching from his perch, felt a tidal wave of relief wash over him. He was no longer staring at the abyss of unemployment. He was witnessing a master at work, turning a catastrophic error into pure gold. Elvis wasn't angry. He was embracing it, transforming it, making it part of the show. Elvis then turned back to the audience, a mischievous glint in his eye. "All right, settle down now, y'all. Sounds like our little feathered friend just wanted to make a grand entrance. He sure did, didn't he?" He paused for a moment, letting the laughter die down. Then, with a twinkle in his eye, he added, "Now, where were we? Ah, yes, American Trion. Let's try that again, and if our new friend wants to join in, he's worry, glory, hallelujah." He gave a final triumphant grin, and the crowd, still chuckling, gave him a thunderous round of applause. The band, picking up on his cue, Bassig launched back into the introduction of American Trion, their playing imbued with a renewed sense of fun and energy. Leo, still trembling but now with relief and awe, quickly checked his board, ensuring no more rogue sounds would escape. The show had not only been saved, it had been elevated into legendary status by the sheer brilliance of the king. The second attempt at American Trion began, but it was fundamentally different. The initial shock was gone, replaced by an undercurrent of amused anticipation. Every so often, a quiet chuckle would ripple through the audience. Leo, still mentally replaying the horrifying quack, but now riding a wave of immense relief, focused intently on the mixing board. He triple-checked the FX unit's routing, ensuring it was completely, unequivocally, permanently disengaged. Elvis, ever the showman, leaned into the new energy. He sang the song with the same heartfelt passion, but there was a subtle twinkle in his eye, a barely perceptible grin that surfaced now and then. During the instrumental breaks, he glanced towards the audience, then up towards the sound booth, raising an eyebrow playfully as if daring the duck to make another appearance, and the audience loved it. They were no longer just watching a concert. They were part of a unique, improvised moment, a story unfolding before their eyes. When Elvis sang the powerful "Glory, Glory, Hallelujah" section, his voice soared, and just as the last note hung in the air, a few people in the crowd, emboldened by the king's playful demeanor, actually let out their own quiet, comical quacks. Elvis heard them. His grin widened. He actually laughed out loud, a rich, booming sound that was infectious. He then looked towards the audience. Members who had made the sounds gave them a thumbs up, and then, completely unscripted, did a quick, exaggerated shimmy, shaking his hips, like a duck waddling across the stage. The showroom erupted in another paroxysm of laughter and cheers. Leo couldn't help but smile, a genuine wide smile that stretched his cheeks. He was still in awe of Elvis's quick thinking, his ability to turn a potential disaster into such a triumphant, heartwarming moment. It wasn't just about singing songs, it was about connecting with people, about being human and vulnerable, and then turning that vulnerability into strength. The rest of the show took on a lighter, more joyous atmosphere. During "Can't Help Falling in Love," Elvis made a point of making eye contact with a few children in the front row, doing a little duck face for them, which made them giggle. Continued his banter, occasionally referring to his new feathered friend, or suggesting he might start adding animal noises to his concerts. Every time he did, the audience roared with laughter and applause. Leo, now fully engaged and feeling a renewed sense of purpose, adjusted the levels with a lighter touch. He felt like he wasn't just a technician anymore. He was a silent participant in this incredible, unscripted performance. He was part of the memory that was being created right there, right then. He made sure Elvis's voice was crystal clear, making every ad-lib, every joke perfectly audible. The band, taking their cue from Elvis, seemed to play with an added spring in their step. There was an unspoken camaraderie, a shared understanding that they were all in on this moment, this inside joke with the audience. The show, which could have been derailed, became instead something unforgettable, something truly special. As Elvis launched into the final numbers, Suspicious Minds and Burning Love, the energy in the room was electric. The earlier tension was long forgotten, replaced by pure elation. Elvis worked the crowd, throwing scarves, shaking hands, built into a thrilling crescendo. When he finally struck his iconic pose, legs spread cape wide, a final thunderous chord crashed to the speakers. The roar of the audience was deafening. Leo watched him take his bow, accepting the adoration of his fans. He saw the genuine warmth in Elvis's smile, the sheer joy he radiated. And Leo knew in that moment that he had witnessed not just a concert but a masterclass in grace. His mistake, which had nearly been his undoing, had become a pivotal, hilarious, and ultimately heartwarming part of the legend. The show concluded, not with a whimper, but with an echoing laugh and the lingering memory of a very surprising quack. The lights came up in the showroom, a slow, gentle return to reality. The roar of the audience finally began to subside, replaced by the excited chatter of people reliving the show, especially that moment. Leo carefully shut down his mixing board, the blinking lights winking out, one by one, signaling the end of his shift. His hands were still trembling, but now it was from a mix of exhaustion, elation, and lingering disbelief. He couldn't believe he'd survived. More than that, he couldn't believe how Elvis had handled it. Took off his headset. The silence in the booth feeling stark after the chaos and music. He still felt a knot of anxiety in his stomach. Even though Elvis had been gracious on stage, Leo still expected a stern word from Marty, or even a quiet reprimand from someone in Elvis's management. A mistake like that, no matter how well it was recovered from, couldn't just be ignored. He slowly made his way out of the sound booth, descending the narrow staircase to the backstage area. The backstage was a flurry of activity. Roadies packing up equipment, band members heading for their dressing rooms, the faint strains of conversation and laughter. Leo kept his head down, hoping to slip away unnoticed. Maybe grab a quick word with Marty and offer a sincere apology before disappearing for the night. But as he navigated through the maze of cables and equipment cases, a hand fell gently on his shoulder. Leo flinched, bracing himself. He turned slowly, his heart sinking. It was Elvis. Elvis wasn't in his jumpsuit anymore. He changed into a silk robe, his hair slightly disheveled. He looked tired, but his eyes were kind and a faint amused smile played on his lips. "Leo," son Elvis said, his voice soft, almost conspiratorial. "You got a minute?" Leo's throat tightened. "Yes, Mr. Presley, of course." He braced himself for the lecture, the gentle but firm warning. He rehearsed his apology in his head. Elvis just looked at him, his smile growing. "Well now," he began, "that was certainly a memorable addition to the show tonight, wouldn't you say?" Leo's face flushed red. "Mr. Presley, I am so sorry. I don't know what happened. My elbow, I must have." He stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. "It was a complete accident. I checked everything. I swear I would never intentionally." Elvis raised a hand, stopping Leo's frantic explanation. Whoa there, son. Slow down," he chuckled, a deep, warm sound. "I know it was an accident. Happens to the best of us. This ain't my first rodeo, where something unexpected happens on stage." He paused, his eyes twinkling. "Though I gotta say a duck quack is a new one for me. Caught me completely off guard." Leo felt a wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled his knees. He expected anger, and he got understanding. "Look," Elvis continued, his voice serious now but still gentle. "You gotta understand something, Leo. The show, it's about connecting with people. It's about letting them in, and sometimes those little hiccups, those unplanned moments, they can actually make the show more real, more special." He paused, then added, "You saw how they reacted. They loved it. It broke the ice, made them feel like they were part of something unique." He clapped Leo gently on the shoulder. "Honestly, son, I thought it was hilarious. Took me a second to figure out what was going on. But then I just figured, hey, roll with it. That's what we do. We improvise, and you gave me something to improvise with." He winked. "Maybe we should plan it next time. Call it the Elvis and his amazing Technicolor Duck Tour." Leo stared at him speechless. He could only manage a choked, "Thank you, Mr. Presley. Thank you." Elvis just smiled, a genuine, heartwarming smile that reached his eyes. "Don't you worry about it, Leo. You did good. You got a good ear, and you handled yourself well after the initial surprise. Just keep doing what you're doing, and maybe," he said, turning to walk away, his voice fading slightly, "just maybe put a cap over that quack button, huh?" Leo watched him go, the king disappearing back into the private corridors. He was still trembling, but it wasn't from fear now. It was from overwhelming gratitude. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, had not only forgiven him, but had praised him. He had turned Leo's worst nightmare into a shared joke, a moment of connection, and ultimately a powerful lesson in compassion. Leo felt lighter than air, his heart filled with a warmth that chased away all the shame. He had not failed. He had been part of something truly extraordinary. The duck quack incident, as it soon became known, didn't just stay within the walls of the International Hotel. It spread like wildfire. Audiences who had been there shared the story with anyone who would listen. Fan club newsletters picked it up. Even local newspapers carried small snippets about the King's impromptu animal act. It quickly became one of those legendary Elvis moments, remembered for his quick wit and charming spontaneity. Surprisingly for Leo, the incident didn't lead to disciplinary action, or even a sideways glance, quite the opposite. Marty, the stage manager, pulled him aside the next morning, not to scold but to clap him on the back. "Maxwell," he'd grumbled, a hint of amusement in his eyes, "you gave us all a heart attack, but Elvis loved it. Says you're a surprise element specialist. Just try to stick to his surprises next time, all right?" Other sound engineers, typically a stoic and reserved bunch, nodded at him with new respect. "Heard about your quack," one of them said, a wry grin on his face. "Takes a real professional to set Elvis up for a comeback like that." They were joking, of course, but there was an underlying admiration for the way the crisis had been averted. Leo realized that in the cutthroat world of live entertainment, Elvis's reaction had essentially given him a free pass, even a badge of honor. He hadn't been fired. He'd been given a story that would follow him for years. The incident subtly changed how Leo approached his work. Before, he had been obsessed with perfection, terrified of making a mistake. Now, while he still strove for excellence, he understood that sometimes the unexpected could be managed, even embraced. He learned that grace under pressure wasn't just about fixing things quickly. It was about the spirit in which you faced the unexpected. Elvis had shown him that. He began to notice Elvis's improvisational genius in other ways too. The King never did the exact same show twice. He'd change a lyric, alter a melody, banter with the audience about a local sports team, or respond to a fan's shout-out. Leo, now more attuned to these spontaneous shifts, found himself better able to anticipate and react, making his mixes even more dynamic and responsive. He felt a stronger connection to the performance, a sense of being truly in tune with the artist. The duck quack became an inside joke between Elvis and his crew. Sometimes during a sound check, Elvis would clear his throat, then give a quiet, subtle quack, and everyone would chuckle. It was a shared secret, a reminder of that night. It reinforced the King's reputation not just as a magnificent performer, but as a kind, forgiving, and genuinely funny man. It humanized him, made him even more beloved by those who worked closest with him. For Leo, the weight on his shoulders, the constant fear of failure, had significantly lessened. He understood now that mistakes, while undesirable, weren't necessarily the end of the world. What mattered was how you handled them, and how others reacted. Elvis's compassion had not only saved his job, it had transformed his perspective. It taught him that even in the highest pressure environments, kindness and humor could prevail. His confidence grew not out of arrogance, but from a newfound inner peace. He was still meticulous, still dedicated, but he mixed with a lightness he hadn't possessed before. He knew he was good at his job, and more importantly, he knew he was working for someone who saw him as a person, not just a cog in a machine. The quack, a sound that had once represented his greatest fear, had become a symbol of a turning point, a testament to the unexpected magic that could arise when things went gloriously, hilariously wrong. It was a story he knew he'd carry with him for the rest of his life, a silent, heartwarming reminder of the night. Elvis turned a mistake into a legend. Decades passed. The International Hotel became the Las Vegas Hilton. Elvis Presley. The King passed into legend, his music and charisma immortalized. But for Leo Maxwell, some memories never faded. He was in his 60s now, his hair flecked with silver, his hands still nimble, though perhaps a little slower than they once were. He was no longer just a sound engineer. He was a respected veteran, managing his own state-of-the-art recording studio in Nashville, a place where aspiring young musicians came to capture their dreams. He often found himself reflecting on that night in Las Vegas. It was a story he told, usually with a smile and a shake of his head, to his younger engineers, particularly when they were stressed or feeling the pressure of the big session. "You know," he'd begin, leaning back in his control room chair, bathed in the soft glow of mixing consoles, "I once made the biggest mistake of my life, mixing for the king himself, a huge, embarrassing, catastrophic." He'd then tell them about the American Turia and the robed duck quack. He'd describe the terror, the silence, and then Elvis's incredible immediate pivot. He'd recount the laughter, the improvisation, and the king's quiet kindness. "I thought I was done for," Leo would say, his voice softer now, tinged with a distant fondness. "I thought my career was over before it really began. But Elvis taught me something that night. He taught me that even the biggest screw-ups can become legendary moments, not because of the mistake itself, but because of how you react to it." He'd tap a finger on a console. "This job, it's not just about wires and knobs. It's about people. It's about humanity. And sometimes the most human moments are the ones that are unplanned, messy, even a little silly." The young engineers would listen, fascinated, their eyes wide. They respected Leo for his technical expertise, but they admired him even more for his wisdom, for his calm demeanor. They understood that the story wasn't just about a duck quack. It was about resilience, forgiveness, and the power of humor to diffuse tension and build connections. Leo had worked with countless artists since Elvis seen trends come and go. Technology evolved. The lesson from that Vegas night remained his guiding principle. He approached every session, every challenge, with a blend of meticulous preparation and a quiet readiness for the unexpected. He encouraged his team to learn from their mistakes, not to be crippled by them. He remembered Elvis's gentle reassurance. "It happens to the best of us." Sometimes, when he was alone in the studio late at night, or listening to an old Elvis record, a faint phantom, quo-whack, would echo in his mind. It wasn't a sound of dread anymore. It was a sound of warmth, a humorous reminder of a terrifying moment turned magical. It was a symbol of Elvis's unique genius, his profound humanity, and the unexpected way he had shaped Leo's life. That night, for a brief, terrifying moment, Leo Maxwell had pulled the rug out from under the king. But Elvis, with his boundless charm and quick wit, had simply danced on the bare floor, turning the mishap into an unforgettable part of his legend. It was a heartwarming memory, a testament to the power of grace and a quiet, enduring echo of a duck quack that saved a young soundman's career and forever changed his perspective of live performance.